everybody. A warm welcome to another interview on Wisdom from North. I'm Jannike, and today I'm very excited to be here with Michael LoPatriello, who is the author of the book, The Eye-Opening Enlightenment is Possible. Now, ever since a life-changing spiritual experience that revealed to him his and everyone else's union with the one consciousness, Michael has been looking for answers. And he has investigated religions and spiritual belief systems to find a common thread. And in the book that we're going to speak about today, The Eye-Opening, he's sharing the wisdom that all the world's traditions actually have tools that may lead to an awakening like it did with Michael. Hello, Michael. How are you doing today?
Good. Thank you for having me.
You know, I just finished your book, and I got to say that it really made a deep impression on me. And sometimes when I do research on those I interview, it touches me a bit deeper. And your book did that to me. So I'm so happy about sharing this with more people so that more people can know about it. Because for me, it was feeling like I came home. And what I was astounded by was also that the way Spirit speaks to us is in so many ways and so surprisingly through so many or there is not one way to actually connect with Spirit, and there's not one way to have a mystical experience. I just heard of a woman who met God in an airplane, so I'm like stunned by how Spirit is connecting with us, and that there is not one size fits all in a way. So everything I believed, I don't believe anymore. And now I'm having such an open mind these days. And your book is really, really intriguing to read as well. And you are especially focusing on the common thread between all thought systems and religions. And that's so helpful because in our world where there are so many divisions, like I believe in this and I believe in that, and maybe, there are more commonalities than we might think. So before we go into your experiences, your mystical experiences, the eye-opening, tell us a little bit about your background, because you write in the book that you never felt that you, at home in interactions, you felt like you were playing a character in a way. Can you tell us how that was?
Yeah. Especially when I was younger, I started deeply questioning who I was because I felt like every encounter I would change. I felt like I was an actor, basically, and this character that I would become was almost automatic, almost subconscious, and it was very disorienting because afterwards I'd be like, why did I act that way? It was automatic, and then I began to think, is it other people's perceptions of me making me automatically act that way? And I was very, like I say in my book, very chameleonic. I like to say, I would change. I would just change certain groups of people. I'd be like this, like that. And it was concerning me because like I said, it was like automatic. And that really what started me asking, who am I? If if I act this certain way around this person, this certain way about that person, who am I really? Who is this person? Because these masks seem to change so quickly and so easily and automatically. So that really what started my search for the answer of who am I, which I think is one of the big questions in spirituality is who are we? What is this consciousness? What are we really?
Yes, and I'm just reflecting upon that you went on a really deep search. It wasn't like you were curious about it, like you went to India, you really needed answers, and you started also to have these heart openings. And I find that very interesting because it has to do with emotions. And sometimes I feel like we judge emotions, like we feel like we should be happy all the time, or there's so many interpretations of how, or meanings about how we should feel when we are spiritual. So can you tell us about these heart openings and how that actually cracked your heart open and led to something more profound?
Right. Yeah. I'd be happy to. So in middle school, I started having, like you said, these heart openings, what I now call heart openings. And at that time, people would say that observed me would just say he had emotional breakdown. I would just start sobbing. From the outside, it would seem like I would get sad and start sobbing. But really, it's far from being sad. It was an overwhelming feeling of love that came from it. But they did begin usually as a panic attack. It would be my thoughts start to race. I would be confused. I'd feel this really tangible feeling in my chest of my heart aching, like a real ache and cramp almost. And it felt like I needed to like open it up or stretch, and almost an impending sense of doom, which is doesn't sound very great. But when I eventually would surrender to it, I would start sobbing, and sobbing like an infant, like very deep breathing, just totally letting go, and that release would come with the feeling of the heart opening, and this warm, tangible energy would pour out from my heart. Is very specifically from the heart. I feel it start from there and then pour into my body, and this overwhelming feeling of you are loved, you're taken care of, and almost like, it's okay, I'm here, whatever this I am, this presence. And it did feel like a presence, a wiser, bigger, had the big picture, all loving presence would fill me. And that mind of fear and worry and trying to control would be hushed, and that would be a silent, and that would just be observing this presence. And it was, remarkable. When I had these, I started in middle school, so fairly young, so I was very much like, what was that? What just happened? No one else seems to be having this around me. Everyone thinks I'm just sad. Everyone else in society correlates these tears, very intense sobbing, with sadness. But these tears were not sadness, far from sadness. It was just overwhelming surrender to a higher love and power. And something that I couldn't ignore, because they did happen several times, not very often, but enough where I'd be like, I can't ignore this. I need to investigate this. And that's, again, and that also is what led me to further explore spirituality, because nothing in school could explain those things. Nothing from my friends or family could explain those things, really. So those were really when I was young, started me questioning more and more, and not just taking things face value from society. It felt like there was something left out. We're not being told everything that we really are, as I felt. So those really impacted me extremely when I was young.
And today, you have, it's just so beautiful how you describe this reality and how you see the light, love, and everything, and we'll come to that. But before that, did you have this connection with the divine, or was it more that you kind of discovered it more and more?
I definitely discovered it more and more. With the exception, I do have some memories when I was younger. I don't know how old I would have been, maybe 5 or 6. But I do have a couple memories with all of a sudden I would stop and look around and feel that love. But they were very brief, and they weren't as extreme of experience as the sobbing and the heart openings. They were just kind of a momentary, like I'd look around, and it felt like a higher intelligence was looking through me. It was almost like, if you believe in reincarnation and our souls are old, older than our bodies, it was like my bigger, higher self would look through for a second. And it knew things that as my child self didn't know. So I only had that couple times. So really, it was discovery. It was the heart opening, those heart openings came from left field, and it kind of cracked open this new world of possibility.
It's very interesting. We might get back to that later on, but emotions, like something that seems low vibrational or difficult, or when we have these emotions that like anxiety and depression and everything, and we're so fighting them, and then when we surrender, something happens. And I want to go back to that later, because you discovered that there were some spiritual truths, and we'll come back to that. But I kind of want to go a bit linear here for once. So you started having some visions, and I thought that was very interesting, because some symbols came forward in these visions. Especially a serpent, I think it was. Can you tell us about some of these visions? Sorry.
Yeah. No, it's okay. Yeah, in my book, is the first half is basically just telling my story, and I talk about the visions. And so it started out, I'd have these heart openings, like I already described. But then later on, and I was in high school at that point, I think 16, 17 years old, I had an incident where I started sobbing, but then I had a vision. I just saw something in my mind, and I was rising up. I was in a void, basically, like almost like an outer space, but no stars, just a black void. And I was slowly rising up in the middle of a big spiraling serpent, and a direct resemblance to the Hermes, like the medical sign, the two snakes. But in this vision, it was just one snake. Or the rod of Asclepius, which is another symbol for medicine. It's just one rod and then one snake going around it. And I was going up it, and there was a giant snake, and I was looking up, and there was a bright, bright light right where the snake's head was, so I couldn't really see the head. And I was rising up it. And the symbology, I had no idea what that. Only that it resembled the medical symbol. So at the time, it led me to investigate, to look further into it. It was almost like clues I was receiving, because I had no idea what this symbology meant. And I also, looking up, I heard, "Beware, that's where the head is," looking up at the snake's head, which again, at the time, I had no idea what that was. Very mysterious, these things that were happening.
You heard
so
that?
Was,
like a voice?
Yeah, in my head, not outside of me. But yes, I heard it very clear. "Beware, that's where the head is," or "Be careful, that's where the head is." So that was very interesting, and I believe that was a warning for something that happened a little later on in my life. But yeah, that was one of the visions I had regarding snakes.
Right, and you started having these mystical experiences in a way without, like you're saying, meditating all the time or really practicing or doing spiritual practices. Isn't that right?
Right, exactly. Yeah. And I talk about this quite a bit in the book, but I think what made it possible, or why these things happened to me, I think, is because I was very, very passionate and very focused on it, and basically that's all that mattered to me. All my heart, mind, body was thinking about that, investigating that, and I had the innocence. I was a child still, high school, adolescent, but I think something about the innocence and believing in it. I really didn't have doubts that certain things were possible. I thought enlightenment was possible since I was having these experiences myself. It was very real to me. So I feel like, yes, I wasn't doing meditating. I wasn't doing certain techniques that we assume that must be the path, or maybe not all of us, but we always correlate, we got to meditate, we got to do a certain amount of hours, or but it was more for me fully engaged and all in, almost like fully engaged in it and very passionate and actively seeking.
And I find that so beautiful, because that pure heart, that communicates with the universe. Of course the universe gets that,
Right.
Your beautiful search, that's a call out to the universe. And why shouldn't, the universe answer? So I really like that. I think often we get trapped in all those doctrines about how to be spiritual.
Right, totally.
Yeah. So, and then you went to Prague, and you had this amazing experience with the third eye. And I had to share this with a teacher that I'm working with in Norway, because she has a school where we are reading through the third eye. She's like the third eye, like teacher. And she was really touched by your story. Because like she has been talking about the third eye her whole life, and I have been more about the heart. Like I haven't really connected to the third eye that much, but I loved how you described it, and I would love for you to share it if you'd like, and then to dig a bit deeper into it. And because I find it so, it explains so much the connection to the divine and who we actually are. So if you'd like to share what happened in Prague.
Yeah, I'd love to. Yes. So I was studying abroad. It was my first year in college. I was in Prague, and I was on a walk. And again, like I said, I was almost antisocial at this point. That I was so into learning more about spirituality. I was just diving headfirst. I was reading outside of my schooling. I was doing my own research, basically. And I was on the phone on this walk outside. It was springtime. The trees were in bloom. It was very beautiful. Prague's very beautiful in spring. And I was walking up a hill. I was on the phone with my mother, and we were talking about something. I forget exactly what. But then all of a sudden, I felt the ache in the heart, or the pain that I was used to at this point of the heart openings. Even though I was used to it, every time it does make me nervous, because the feeling of surrender is scary at first. It's almost like you're letting go of the wheel, right? And you're letting this bigger presence come in. And it's almost like the ego is always a little afraid to do that. So it's still a little bit scary and overwhelming each time that it happens. So again, that happened, the ache, I started to sob. Deep
Right
breathing.
outside in the middle of the park, or?
Oh, yeah, sorry, yeah. Explain more where I was. Yeah, I was walking up a cobblestone street, a steep hill. It was in Petrin Hill. It's a hill across the river overlooking Prague. And I was reaching the top of it, and I just started to sob on the cell phone. And then I saw over to the side was a park. So then I walked over to the park, and my mom was on the phone, and she was like, "It's okay, what's wrong? Like, just sit down somewhere." She was trying to just help me get through it. And I wasn't able to respond because I was sobbing, very deep breathing, very emotional, a lot of tears. So I sat down in the park against a tree. And again, it's very tangible. The heart, I feel the heart open. It does feel like it opens, and it cracks open. So that was very similar, but now the energy went up, and I felt it go up my body, up to my head. And it's a buzzing energy. It feels like it's, I really felt it. And I really go over this a lot in the book about how it's really undescribable, right? How do we describe these profound moments in words? We can't, but of course I'm going to try, because it's important to share these things. It's a beautiful moment. So the energy went to my head, and then when I would blink, my eyes, my forehead, all of a sudden felt like it would go boom, boom, and it was so intense that I relate it to an orgasm. But instead of in the genitals, it's in the center of my head. That much overwhelming, like I was almost like moaning, like, "Oh, what's happening?" And as I would blink, and every time I'd blink, my whole body would shake, because the immensity of the energy going through it. And another way I could describe it is, it feels like all of a sudden a rebirth, because then I felt like a small child. I felt a silence of my thoughts, and this profound, incredible, all these words I try to use to describe it, feeling of a higher intelligence, a higher love looking through me. So instead of before just the feeling of it, it's like this eye opened, and it felt like an eye. And it was looking through me, and then as I looked around, everything was one light. Now, that's a very short statement to say everything's one light, but seeing that is, beyond words. It's life-changing. It's humbling. It made me cry more. I cried harder because of how overwhelming the love was, and I could feel it. It's not only see the shimmering. Everything still appeared as it did before, right? I still saw the trees, I still saw the park, but everything was shimmering with this light, and it was that light. It wasn't on top of the things. It was the deeper essence of the things I was seeing. And the light that my third eye all of a sudden was seeing, or was revealing to me, was also the light within me. And that came from a feeling, again, so hard to describe in words, but it's like when I opened, everything opened. It's like when my third eye opened and that vision opened, it's like every point, every speck of all space opened and revealed its light. And again, which is one of the themes that I talk about, the core, spirituality, is I felt very childlike. I felt this presence within me that opened was very motherly or fatherly. And it was, again, that feeling like, hush, hush, child, it's okay, I'm here, it's okay, you can relax. And love, 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 right? It's just this unbelievable love, otherworldly love, a love I've never felt before. And a wisdom in that love. And it's almost like, if I use some metaphor in the book, it's like if I was compared to the rest of my life, I was in like a closet with a little candle for a light, and then all of a sudden all the walls fell down and I was on top of a mountain, just trying to give any sort of metaphor to feel, to express the change of perception all of a sudden, right? So that was the experience, and it's not like it stayed open. It was an eruption almost, right, of energy, crying, looking around, awestruck, and then it's slowly fading. And I remember feeling and realizing this is going to go away, this perception. You've had a glimpse. It's going to go away for now, but you've had a glimpse, and that's okay. And it slowly faded, and I sat there just, awestruck, and slowly my sobs subsided. And another metaphor that came to me, and it was like, your life is almost like a video game. And I think because I was younger at that point, that metaphor made sense to me because I played video games as a kid. And this presence was like as if my ego or the body is like the character in the game. Presence looking through me was like the player of the game. So just a metaphor, I guess, of that higher self. It's a wider perspective. When you're that character, you feel so in the game or in life or reality, right? You feel so in it. But this perspective's a bird's eye view. It's further back. And that was my experience.
Wow.
It was
Truly
very
profound.
intense.
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing.
Yeah, you're welcome.
There's like part of what you're saying that just resonates, and I don't know why, or it just rings true, almost like I understand what you're saying without having experienced that, but I've had my own mystical experiences that have been totally different, but still I can understand what you're saying, like almost feeling like an orgasm in your forehead, even though it's not in the right place, like the sensation that you feel something in another place that you usually feel it or should feel it. So I was so there with you in the book. And you're also saying that you thought perhaps this came because you built up an intensity in your energy. And I thought that was interesting because, again, like when we meditate, we are not like sobbing, or building up anything or breathing heavily. We're like very silent and can go into all these dimensions if we really, are good meditators, or what is good. But I think you know what I mean. So can you talk a bit about that? How you thought that these experiences came through this intense building up of emotions or energy?
Right. Yeah. And based on my experiences, I feel like emotion is so undervalued in our society, in our worlds. And I feel like emotion in the English language, it's very, it's emotion, right? Energy and motion. Like the word itself explains a lot of what it is. It's our energy, and it's moving. And when we repress emotions, we're repressing our energy. So the building up was, and especially in that moment before the third act, I was on the phone with my mom and we were talking about spirituality, and I was getting excited, more excited. And I was like kind of ranting, saying these things, and it was building up. And it's almost like it builds up to a peak, and then like it gets to a point where you gotta get out of the way in a sense. You know what I mean? Got to get out of your own way for it to come through. And yeah, purely in all my experiences, it's been emotion, a surrender to a rise of emotion within you. It's almost like it's a knocking at the door of, knocking at the door of like, I want, like, let me in. I'm here to help you. but I'm such a bigger amount of energy than you're used to. You got to let me take the wheel, almost, you know, like we don't want you to control this. Just let us do the work. And I know that sounds very separate, but I don't know how else to explain it, right? Because the personality self needs to kind of surrender in the sense and let that emotion rise through.
Right.
Yeah.
So is that something you recommend? Like, I just got to say that these past few months have been crazy for me, and I just made a video blog about it that I'm going to release tomorrow. I think that something is going on in 2020 now with some intense energies, and I've started talking about it now because now I have some distance to it. But I felt this chaos energy inside of me, like I was spread all over, like I was in 1,000 pieces, and I had no idea what was going on, and I wish in the moment that I knew what to do. I did not surrender. When I look back, I did not surrender. I tried to get together because I was having a webinar, like a live webinar with 1,500 people waiting for me. So I had to pull myself together. But I knew that something spiritual is going on. I'm not depressed. I don't have anxiety. It was just this, I felt it was Shiva coming and destroying everything. So do you have and I think many other people are experiencing this and have, because I've talked to so many people lately that have been like, what has been going on? So do you have some suggestions, like when we come to this intense emotions, what to do? Like, what is surrendering really?
Right. That's a very good question, because for me, it's indescribable, but surrendering, I mean, to make it very practical, a tool for me, since I've had those experiences, is breathing. The saying, take a deep breath, is very poignant and might sound cliche, but very, it works, right? So breathing, and to make it very practical, breathing can help you surrender.
Okay.
And deep breathing for an extended period of time. And it almost resembles, it can get you to that state of surrender because it resembles the state of sobbing. And this is very personal because for me, sobbing is related to spiritual experiences, maybe not for everyone. But when I start deep breathing like this, it almost gets me back to that state of being, of sobbing. Mm-hmm. So it's like a key or a shortcut into that surrender state. Mm-hmm. So practical advice for getting that surrender and letting go is deep breathing. Mm-hmm. And breath is such a powerful tool because it doesn't require a mental technique, right? You don't have to change your thought process. You just start breathing. That's all you got to do. And your thought process changes automatically. Mm-hmm. It also is a great reset, I find. If you're really stuck in something or you can't shake a feeling, you start breathing. If you're really consistent with it and stick with the deep breathing and keep going, afterwards you're almost like, why was I so... it's like a restart to the computer almost. It's like, why was I so confused or upset? It like wipes clean and a fresh start. But beautiful. So for very practical, I said breathing is a huge tool for me to surrender to those, especially when you're that feeling very chaotic. Yeah, just brings you right back to your body. Start breathing, and you have that connection.
Beautiful. Thank you for that advice. Breath is so important, and we forget about it.
Yeah, I forget about it all the time.
Yeah. So after these, beautiful experiences, things shifted also. So you had the opposite, which I find so interesting. And you spoke about spiritual emergency and the Kundalini energy that we hear about, and not everybody understands really, or it is quite mystical. I don't understand it myself. What is it really? But what I've kind of understood is that a sudden spiritual awakening is not healthy. I've understood that these energies are so powerful that if we open up too quickly, it can be unmanageable. And also sometimes I think when people, are the society is calling them crazy or schizophrenic, perhaps are actually going through a spiritual awakening that came too sudden. Because honestly, all of a sudden we might be able to see into other dimensions, and in other dimensions there are different voices and beings and astral beings and all that. So what is what, in a sense? So can you tell us a little bit, because you said that in this vision you had this warning that be aware of the head or be careful for the head, and that was explained later on when you had all of a sudden the opposite of a beautiful experience.
Yeah. So after that, after my third eye, I didn't change anything outside of myself. It's almost like I was afraid to share it. It was so powerful. I kept it to myself. I shared it with my mom and my sister. I think that's really it. And I still am, but I've always been pretty shy. So I think my personality too was I kept it inside of me. And then I started getting this, and it's weird looking back, because looking back, it's like, why was I feeling this way? But I started to feel this desperation, because I went back to college, and I was like, what am I doing? How could I sit in a lecture hall, listening to a professor when I've had this experience? I can't ignore this experience, right? I dropped college, and I told myself I'm going to do a fast, and I was really being too extreme with myself and my naivete, as a kid. I should have been a little more gentle. I was like, I need to figure this out. I was getting desperate. I don't really know why, looking back on it, but I had this desperation feeling, like, this happened. What do I do now, really? And I really didn't feel any guidance. I didn't know what to do. And in my desperation, I kind of went into a tailspin. I've had some readings and other spiritual teachers talk about it, and they called it a psychic shock. I feel like I opened an energy within me, and then I went into fear. I don't know why I went into fear. Looking back, it's very dreamlike, and I always call it a nightmare. So I basically, an outside observer would say, I stopped talking, I stopped responding, and I stopped eating. And it's very trippy to look back on that time, but everything became very dreamlike. I stopped sleeping too. And I couldn't get out of this brain. Like, I would think of something and manifestations would start happening outside of me. And a lot of people would say, oh, you're sleep deprived, you're hallucinating. And it was more than that. And I go into much more detail in the book, but I won't here this interview. But things would happen. I would think of something and something would happen to my body. And so basically my thoughts were manifesting instantly, which is beautiful in a sense, right? Because you're realizing how powerful our thoughts are. I awaken this energy. But I went into fear, and I felt out of control, and I had forgotten that sense of love and humbleness. And I eventually ended up in the hospital and I feel bad for my mom and stepdad at that time. I was with them, and they didn't know what to do with me, understandably. And obviously they're concerned. So I went to the hospital. In Western medicine, said I was schizophrenic, bipolar. They basically put all these labels on it because they didn't understand, which it's okay. It's okay. I get it. They don't understand. And they put me on heavy medication. And then after that, after I got out of the hospital, I stopped taking the medication. I slowly weaned myself off because that stuff was very scary, to be honest, because I saw how numbing they are and how, in my opinion, I'm sure, of course it helps people. Some people have imbalances in the brain, but it was really extra scary to be on the medication while already in that weird state of mind. But after that, and again, as a kid and being kind of naive, I felt like I had failed spirit. I felt like I had reached this peak and just, too close to the sun. My wings caught on fire and I just fell and hit the ground. And I kind of gave up. It's so strange looking back. It's silly almost of what I was like. What was I thinking? But I was young, and I was like, oh, I failed spirit. I totally failed. And so I stopped my searching. I went back to school. I started drinking a lot of alcohol, and I started doing drugs and partying, basically. And such extremes, right? I have this beautiful, amazing, enlightened moment, and then this experience happens. And it's interesting because it's the lessons from it are strong and valuable. And going back to that vision, I said the warning. Later, I realized that was warning. Beware, that's where the head is. I believe it was referring to as the energy rises up to your head, like literally in my case, in the third eye, the feeling of the energy going to your head. And in the yogic mysticism, the Kundalini energy going up the chakras. As it goes up to more of your mind, your thoughts become more powerful and you manifest more quickly.
Right.
So there's not as much of a delay. So it's like beware or just be aware of what you think of, because you're responsible for what you think of, and what you sow you shall reap, right? What you give out in energetically comes right back to you. Reality is a mirror, right? So the lesson was powerful, but in my experience it was scary. I was in a nightmare kind of, and it was all in my own head. But so that was the spiritual emergency, people call it, and it's almost like it was way too much too fast for me at that age, right? To have that awakening.
You gained some superpowers and no one has told you how to have superpowers and what to do with them. And I mean, just hearing about it, it's not so cool as it looks in cartoons, It's pretty scary when you can experience. I mean, I was stunned when I read it in the book. It was so intriguing and interesting to read about the examples you give in the book of how you think a thought and it manifests. Like, is this for real?
Yeah.
Almost like you were tapping into another dimension, because in the astral world, I've been lucid a lot of times. That's when you think about something and it appears. But in this physical body, like, even my mindset is like, what? How is that possible?
Of course, yeah, totally, and I understand that. Yeah, it's hard to grasp.
But clearly, it is. Yeah.
Yeah. It made me really. It was very mind-boggling afterwards. Especially looking back, and how malleable reality is, and how it is. Quantum physics is realizing it. Everything is just what you observe it to be, and it becomes very trippy to think about that. Like it is a dream. Everything seems real to us, but it was very paradigm shifting for sure.
And obviously you found the balance now, and you've written this book. So tell us a little bit about why this urge came to actually share. Like you're saying, you're a shy guy, you didn't, share it as much, and now you've written a book and actually been really honest and open-hearted. So tell us about, what prompted you to do that?
Yeah. So what happened, I was playing a game, and I picked a card, and it said, what would you do if you had one more year to live? What's one thing you would do? And I really started thinking. I said, if I would pass away in 1 year and I didn't tell anyone about this, I should tell some, right? I should tell some people about this. This is very important. This is a glimpse into human potential. This is something we've forgotten in modern society, that we are much more powerful, and we're meant to, in my opinion, to evolve in that sense. And we have these powers and these higher perceptions that we have forgotten and haven't tapped into. So that simple game and that question, I was like, I need to go back to this. I need to revisit this experience. And writing it down was also very therapeutic. So once I started, just poured out of me. And yeah, the idea of like finding treasure and then it disappearing, and now wanting to tell people about the treasure. There's a treasure, there's a treasure here. We all have it. It's right within you. We should all look for it. It's like a feeling you want to share this. It's so beautiful. And it's like everyone has amnesia, right? We've all forgotten this. We're not taught this, that having a glimpse of it, it's like everybody like, remember, right? Remember, this is what we are. So that was the inspiration to write the book, was to share this beautiful experience, because I hope it helps people, or maybe not help, but it inspires them to keep looking. If they're losing courage, or they're just losing steam, it's like, no, these things are possible. There is much more to us than we've been taught and led to believe.
do you now feel a higher calling to continue with this work in a sense, like perhaps like traveling around studying to speak about this, um, perhaps teaching others people how to experience this, or is it just more confined to the book and you're living another kind of life? I don't know. Are you living from doing this, or are you doing something completely different? Or
No, that's a good question. Like I said, like after I had that traumatic experience, I kind of just dropped it all. But now I'm coming back to it, and no, it's very much my number one thing in my life, and maybe not to make money, right? I don't really make money from these things, but it's basically all I think about. And I'm kind of finally coming back around from that traumatic experience of being like, okay, I need to, like, this is what is important, right? And kind of shaking off that trauma, psychic trauma. And I've always had this deep sense of you will teach when you fully become it yourself. Oh. And I feel like I haven't fully become it yet, or that makes sense. It's like, I forget the exact quote, but there's a great quote, like, or there's one from Jesus, like, don't try to remove the mote from your brother's eye till you remove your own mote from your eye. Right? Like, first, I want to not be hypocritical and tell people what's what, because I don't know, right? I don't know, and maybe I won't ever know, but I feel like I want to become that thing. I want to see if it's possible for me, and if it is, just my example will be the biggest teaching. And I've basically dedicated my life to that, and on the outside, I don't really proclaim that on the rooftops. But internally, that's all that matters to me, is seeking that state of being open, seeing everything as one, and being almost a channel for that love of this higher, whatever you want to call it, right? Self, God, consciousness, the one, in everything, to express through me and be that conduit. So as a job, I do, basically right now I do odd jobs. I do, this summer I do whitewater rafting, which I love, being outside. I adventure stuff, and then I write, but not yet for money. I made this book, obviously, but so if that answers your question, I haven't really done public stuff yet. Yeah.
Right, and I find this so beautiful because I've interviewed so many different spiritual teachers, and just for the simplicity of it, I call them spiritual teachers. Because that's what they are to me. They're talking about, they're explaining us the spiritual dimensions and how we're spiritual beings having a human experience. But what I find is that they are so different. They're also different, and I love that. And I think that's how it's supposed to be. And what is so important is that we follow our own music inside. Like for you, it's important to be what you teach. For others, it's not. Like Neil Donald Walsh told me that I teach what I need to learn myself. And I love that. And I'm kind of in that category because I feel like I'm never going to get there somewhere. But I teach what inspires me. And I think we need everything. We also need that example. And we need those who are good at just explaining something. But probably they're not walking the talk, but they're trying. But it's still inspirational. So again, it's like all these versions, all these angles, all these perspectives, and you've done such a magnificent job in the book of pulling wisdom from all these traditions and saying, here it is, they're saying the same. And you really, I was so impressed by all the work you've been doing, knowing all these different really wisdom books like the Bhagavad Gita and I can't remember them all, but you've done some amazing research for us, so we can learn. So it's so beautiful. So a bit back to the insights that you received, because you, in a way, you and I was very curious about this. What's the insight that came through these mystical experiences? So there were 9 spiritual truths that became evident, and people can read them in the book. But what are the most important spiritual truths that you have come to?
Yeah, so out of the 9, and it's based on, of course, based on my own experiences, right? And then the research, reading books, like you're mentioning, that confirmed those experiences or those convictions. And of the 9, the most important one is the 9th, in my opinion, which is love. And that love is the one, and then the truth number 1 is that the one is the all are the one. So basically that love is everything, right? And that one's the most important, because without that one, none of it matters to me, or it doesn't, nothing of it makes sense. That's the core, right? Is that this energy, we have this word we use to say love, but really love is the energy behind creation, in my opinion. And it's the answer to, why are we here? What are we doing? Like, why, all these why questions is love. It's the most important one. If you see in religions, fundamental message is that, right? It's God is love. You are love. Love each other. And along that, and from that theme comes all the other ones, right? Be childlike is another one, which being childlike is just allowing yourself to receive this love, right? It's like as a child is loved by their parents, you need to be able to receive it. And to receive it, you need to be in this state of innocence, of childlike curiosity and amazement and wonder. And it is mysterious, right? Everything. So being like a child. And another one that comes from that love is surrender. Another idea that comes up again and again in things that I've read. Surrender to love, because you need to receive in order to give. And to receive the love, you need to surrender. And so out of them all, really they all branch from that idea of that God is love, basically. And what is God? God is the consciousness, energy, power, and everything.
And do you feel now that you have really like a strong connection and intuition, or was it more like these experiences that are very separated and you can't tap into it if you do certain breathing exercises or build up the energy? Or do you feel like you have now like a stronger bond in a sense? Some have opened these powers in a way that maybe clairvoyance or all these clairs, in a sense that you have like a more direct connection.
Right. Yeah. I don't, in the sense that, and I've learned from other teachers or read things that people have, like you're saying, like clairvoyance and these things. I don't really, and the thing that I feel like I do have from that experience too is really awakened is extreme empathy. Almost to the point of confusing whether I'm feeling a thing or someone else is feeling a thing. And then concluding from that, does it matter where it's coming from? I'm feeling it, right? So here it is. So I guess that's one of the heightened perceptions, you could say, is just extreme empathy. And if anyone in the room is made fun of, it's like they made fun of me. They might as well have attacked me.
Right.
Or if anyone in the room, yeah.
Wow. So you really feel that oneness then?
Right. It's more of a, yeah, exactly. And again, it goes back to emotions. For me, emotion is the most, that's like I don't know if that's key for me, is the emotion. So feeling others' feelings and feeling the connection. Yeah, feeling the oneness.
And like you're saying in the book, it's so important with direct experience.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So do you have any advice on how we can actually have a direct experience? If you had any advice like that, when people hear this and perhaps I want to have this connection myself, what can I do? How can I have my own direct experience? What would you say?
Yeah, well, I think the number one thing is if they have that passion. I say passion, but that's the number one thing. So if they want it, right, ask and you shall receive. That's the number one thing. And if you believe it can happen, then it will happen. But the sense of, so if you want a direct experience, the feeling of being all in. So your heart is fully in it, your mind's fully in it, you're fully in it, and you're passionate about it. It's like all of your expressions of yourself are focused on that. And I think that it's just inevitable that you will. And of course, believing it's possible. If you don't believe it's possible, nothing's going to happen for you. You have to believe. You have that sense of wonder. But but again, the emotion of excitement, right? Excitement, passion towards that thing. That's, in my experience, that's what I feel like, that's why I had these experiences. I was very, very passionate and believed it was possible. And it was almost like my mission, my goal, my mission was that. I guess on a more practical level, I would just have to go back to breathing. And again, this is very biased, of course, through my experiences, but breathing is just such a powerful tool. I've had the most, and I've done, since my experiences when I was doing drugs and recently, but I've tried other, tools like plant medicine, right, or psychedelics and other shamanic tools to get in different states, receive messages, but nothing compares to the moments of the heart opening. Really? Not even close. Yeah.
Oh my goodness, that says it to me.
Yes. No, not because none of them cracked open my heart and came from such a deep part within me. It was almost like it was a show, or like flashing lights, but nothing opened me up and poured out like those instances. So almost, and breathing can lead, at least for me, can lead to those experiences. So breathing, I feel like, is very, very powerful to have spiritual experiences. And like holotropic breathing, if people have heard of that, there's different schools and ways to teach deep breathing. Really, it's just deep breathing or pranayama. But you can have very intense experience just breathing. So I think that's a very powerful tool people can use. So
natural, just breathing.
Yeah.
It's
yeah. Right. So I know, I love it. It's so beautiful. It's just breathing. It's our number one thing we need, right? Just air. Yeah.
Wow. I'm so grateful for your sharing. I'm so grateful for your book. Where can people find your book?
It's on Amazon. Yeah, it's called The Eye Opening. Just type in on Amazon. I self-publish through Amazon, so it's only available there right now.
Beautiful. And I can put a link below in the video as well.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. And I really hope that this book reaches a lot of people. I really do. I'm so grateful for have read it, and I think I'm just going to read it again, to be honest, because I felt like there was so much wisdom there in all the lines. So yeah, beautiful. Thank you for actually coming out and sharing, because that might sometimes be difficult. It's not easy, coming out with such a personal and private experience. So thank you, and all the best with your wonderful work.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. Thank you for everything. Thank you.
You're welcome. And thank you for watching, guys. And remember to subscribe to my channel if you haven't before. Much light from here. Bye-bye.